Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make broccoli and cheddar soup and some Reuben sandwiches, as well as prep some pie dough for our chicken pot pies for later tonight. So I'm going to first start by chopping up one yellow onion, and I'm going to do a nice dice on it, and then I'm going to start sauteing that up in my Dutch oven. Get my yucky outer skin off. Here we go. And I'm going to turn my Dutch oven on, and I got to grab a little bit of olive oil. I'm going to put that in here to heat up so I can saute my onions in the olive oil. So just put a little bit in there, and now I'm just going to cut my onion in half, and I'm just going to do a simple dice on it. So I just chop here, just like this. And then I'm going to do, again, cut through here and then just chop it up. Perfect, just like this. And I'm gonna add my onions in here and give them a good stir. Just like this. And I'm gonna let those cook, and I'm gonna start prepping my carrots and my broccoli. So I'm gonna chop up my carrots right here. And I'm gonna do just kind of a nice, easy chop on it. I don't want them to be too big because I want them to get tender in our soup, and our broccoli is going to be the star of the show today. There we go. So I just grabbed like a handful of baby carrots, and I'm just chopping them up into about this size pieces. So they're not too big, but they will get real tender in our soup real quick, which is what I want. It'll also add a little pop of color to our broccoli and cheddar soup. Okay. I'll put these in with my carrots and my onions so I can saute them up together. And we got a runaway one. And I have just a little bit more carrots. And this will add a little bit of, carrots are a little bit sweeter of the vegetable, so it also adds a little bit of sweetness to our broccoli and cheddar soup. I make my broccoli and cheddar soup, I don't like it to be super thick or I feel like sometimes you get broccoli and cheddar soup and it's really pasty or chunky. I don't use any flour in mine. I just kind of use real cheddar cheese and cream and chicken broth to make my broth base for it soup, but it's not going to be a really thick stew. I like it to be a little bit lighter, and but I think the broccoli flavor really comes out, and it just tastes less processed. So I've got our carrots chopped up in here. And I'm going to give this a good stir. I'm going to let this saute in that olive oil. And I'm going to add about a teaspoon of minced garlic to this as well, just for a little bit of extra seasoning. You could use fresh garlic if you have it, but I just find it easier to get one of these things and takes less work. Now I'm going to give it a good stir. Perfect. And I'm going to chop up my broccoli. I got down here, you could use the bag of broccoli florets if you have it. Try to use fresh. I find that frozen can get it will fall apart really quickly in your soup. So I recommend using fresh broccoli. And I'm just gonna take the bottom of the stalk off, but I'm also gonna chop up the stalk as well, because that gets pretty tender in our soup. But it's a little bit harder to cut, so I'm going to just take the big part off first, and then I'll add that and chop that up next. So, and I'm just going to really do a pretty good chop, because you don't want any really big pieces in your soup, because you want what you can handle on a spoon. So I chop it up pretty good. So I'm not going to want any pieces bigger than this, because otherwise, it'll be too hard to eat, because it is a soup and you eat it on a spoon. There we go. So if you do buy the bag, like if you were to buy the fresh broccoli florets, you're just going to want to do a coarse chop over them before you dump them in just because you're gonna want them to be just a little bit smaller. And that also makes sure you get like good broccoli on every bite. There, nice little chop up. But I've been kind of craving this. I drove by Panera when I was taking my daughter to her doctor's today, and I was like, oh, you know what, I should make broccoli and cheddar soup. And I had some broccoli, which is good. I always have carrots and onion. Those are a staple in my refrigerator. Carrots, onions, potatoes, butter, cream, and bouillon. I always have those. I never run down on those because those are in so many like basic ingredients for so many recipes, and you can do them in so many different ways. So I have, as you can see, I've got my broccoli here, my floret tops chopped up real nice. And now I'm also gonna chop up these stalks, but they're a little bit harder to chop up, so I've gotta make them into slightly there. I'm kind of chopping them up how I would like a carrot. So just a nice dice, but they'll get really tender in the soup as well. We give this a quick stir. Perfect. And now that it's stirred and sauteed up, I'm gonna sprinkle it with a little bit of garlic salt, just to season some of these before I put the broccoli in. I use probably about a teaspoon of garlic salt. Mainly, I'm going to be using the chicken bouillon to flavor my broth of this soup, but I do like to, when I'm sauteing up the vegetables, just to salt them up a little, just to give them a little bit more seasoning, so they don't get washed out just in the broth. Perfect. So I've got these all chopped up. And now I'm going to add them to our Dutch oven. Using my knife to kind of scrape them off slowly. I'm not always patient, and a lot of times I always say I have my little escapees. They'll just come right out of there. Good, and you can get all those little greens in there, and then give it a good stir to mix it up. Perfect. And then we are going to add 4 cups of water and a big heaping spoonful of chicken bouillon. And then we're going to let that simmer. You could use straight up chicken broth if you wanted, but I prefer to use water and bouillon. A, because it takes up less room in my pantry, and B, I can add less liquid but get more of the chicken broth flavor. So I'm going to put 4 cups in. When I make my soups, I like to make either 4 like meal-sized portions, but that can be broken up into like 6 smaller portions. So I've got 4 cups of water in here, and it's just enough. I'm gonna push all my vegetables down so they're submerged. And then I'm gonna add in a heaping spoonful of chicken bouillon. This is my brand I like to use, but you can also use, I think, Weiler's or whatnot. They make the little cubes or the powder. You could do that. I like this because it dissolves nicely in my soup. So when I say a big heaping spoonful, it's a big heaping spoonful. There we go. And then I'm gonna stir that up. I'll also be adding in some cream later, so I'll have a little bit more liquid, and the broccoli will also reduce some liquid once it starts to cook, and it will shrink down. But we're gonna start with this, and we're gonna let it simmer and cook, and then towards the end we'll add in some pepper and cheese and cream. But now let's work on our Reubens. So let me flip my cutting board over so I don't get broccoli on it. The bread I'm going to be using today is a deli swirl, so it's a rye and pumpernickel. I find with Reubens, with the corned beef and the sauerkraut, the rye pairs really nicely with it, and I think it's traditionally what is served. I like the swirl bread here because I'm a big fan of pumpernickel bread. I think it tastes better than just general rye. So I'm gonna get out 4 slices if it will let me have them. There we go. Here, I'm gonna grab one too many. So I have my 4 slices of my rye and pumpernickel, and I just think they are really pretty. So this makes a pretty sandwich. But it does have, if you don't like rye bread, you won't like this. But I encourage you to try it if you've never tried it. It does have a slightly stronger flavor, but it pairs really well with the corned beef. So I'm gonna spread a little bit of butter on one side of each of my pieces of bread, just like this. I'm using my butter knife. I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about it, but I do love my butter knife. It's a nice little wooden paddle, but it does spread butter great. So I'm gonna spread and cover this one right here. Then we will start to assemble our corned beef sandwiches, or our Reubens is what they're called if you go to a pub or a restaurant like that. And I'm using corned beef. I got that from the deli, and then I have some sauerkraut, and then my secret ingredient, I use a little bit of Chick-fil-A sauce, and it just makes it so much better. And then I'm using Munster cheese. So I'm just gonna put them on my skillet right here. I'll take the tops off, and we're gonna start assembling. So I'm using Munster cheese, but you could use any cheese if you wanted. I find that the Munster pairs well with the sandwich. It doesn't overpower. It has a nice, kind of more delicate and a really great melting point. But again, you could use cheddar if you wanted, or provolone. Provolone doesn't melt quite as nicely. So I'm just gonna put 2 slices. I could probably get away with 1.5 on each side. So I'll start with 1.5 on each side. And then I picked up some corned beef from our deli. And I'm not gonna put it on too thick because I don't want it to be cold. I want it to be able to cook all the way through. So I'll probably, because these are pretty big slices, I'm just gonna use 2 slices per sandwich. But of course, you could use more if you wanted. I would just maybe microwave it for like 30 seconds to heat it up if you were gonna really stack it. Otherwise, it will be cold because you won't be able to melt it completely. But we have 2 slices of corned beef for each one. And then a little bit of sauerkraut. You don't need much. A little goes a long way, but the acidity in it pairs really nice with the corned beef, the saltiness of the corned beef. I'm gonna use my little hack here for opening up my jars. I just take a butter knife and I pop it under, and I just pop it until I can get a little air in there. Perfect. And then it should open really easy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a little fork here, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of sauerkraut on each sandwich, not a lot, just enough to get a little bit of the kick through of it, the tartness, and that will cut on the saltiness of the corned beef. But you don't need a lot, just a little, but it does make a difference. I always say, don't forget it, you'll want it. Just do it lightly if you're not a huge fan of it. And then I'm gonna do a little drizzle of Chick-fil-A sauce. It adds a creaminess to the acidity, and it just pairs up really nicely. And you don't use a lot, but just a little. And then I'm gonna cover it with another slice of cheese. Put 1.5 on each one. And then we'll start our skillet. I don't need a full one there. There we go, got part of it here. And I'm gonna turn my skillet on medium, and we'll start cooking these grilled cheese, or these Reubens, up. And we'll work on our pie crust for tonight, because we're gonna make chicken pot pie, which is a favorite in this house. And I'll make a nice apple crumb pie with it as well, because I can use my butter crust for both. I'm gonna give this a little stir since it's starting to bubble up nicely. I'm gonna turn on my skillet to medium, and we can work on our butter crust for our chicken pot pie that I'll make later tonight. So I have my ingredients over here, and it's really simple. All you need is butter, flour, salt, and water, and a little bit of elbow grease, and you will have your pie crust in no time, and it tastes so much better than anything you can buy at the store. So I'm gonna start out with, this is going to make enough for 2 chicken pot pies for the bottom and the top, as well as a bottom for an apple pie. So this makes about 5 single crust layers.
What's the name of the bread?
The bread it's a pumpernickel and rye swirl. And it's delicious. It pairs well with the corned beef. So I'm gonna add in 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You're gonna wanna make sure you use all-purpose flour when making pie crust because the gluten will make your dough more chewy instead of flaky. So 4 and about 1/2 cup more. And then I'm going to mix in some salt, about 2 teaspoons of salt. Just doing it in my hand because I kind of know how it is. I'm eyeing it. And before I cut in the butter, I'm going to give this a good stir with a fork just to make sure that the salt is incorporated in the bowl with the flour. Nice. And then I'm going to cut in a pound of butter because again, this is not making just one pie crust. This is making 5 single pie crusts that we'll be using for our chicken pot pies and our apple crisp pie that we're going to make tonight. So I'm going to cut in this cold butter. The trick is you got to use cold butter just like with biscuits. You need to use cold butter, otherwise it will get mushy. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slice them into little chunks like this to make it easier to use. And then I'm just going to use my pastry knife. This is a pastry knife. It looks kind of, ominous, but it will cut up your things. You could also use a food processor if you wanted to, but I find that it works. I can get it done just as fast with my pastry knife, and I don't have to clean the food processor. So I'm just gonna cut this up, just random little chunks. You just wanna make it smaller so that it's a little bit easier to cut up with your knife. I'm gonna give our soup over here a little stir. You can see it's starting to simmer nicely, and I'm just gonna turn it down a little bit lower so I don't have such a large rolling bubble or boil on it. One thing that's nice about Dutch ovens is it keeps the heat in when you cook. It retains it really well, so even if you turn it down, it will still keep it hot for a while. And I'm gonna cut up this, and then I have one more stick of butter after this that I'm gonna cut up. And this is just a really simple but delicious pie crust that you can make. I find that the butter just tastes so much better than if you were to use shortening. I used to use shortening until and then I ventured out for a butter crust, and it makes all the difference. Especially if you're gonna do a chicken pot, like a savory pie, it's just so much more.
You got a question on where we're at?
We live just outside of Nashville. So it's kind of cold here this past week, so having some nice hearty dishes and soups have been real nice. There we go. So I have my butter all cut up in here, and I'm just gonna use my pastry knife, and I'm just going to literally press into the butter, which is gonna cut it into smaller and smaller pieces. And essentially you wanna do this until your butter pieces are no bigger than the size of a pea. And that will give you to have like a really nice flaky and more delicate crust. If you leave some big chunks in there, then you'll have big pockets in your pie crust. And so then once I have this all cut up, then I'm gonna add about a cup of ice cold water. It's between 8 to 10 tablespoons of water, which is around per serving, and I've doubled my pie crust recipe for this, so I need between 18 and 20 tablespoons, which is just around a cup. And you want to make sure you use cold water as well. If you use hot water, it will melt the butter prematurely, and it will also make your dough just more doughy, and it will be more paste, and it will just be hard instead of nice and flaky. And so this dough is gonna be for our chicken pot pies tonight. When you make pie crust, you're gonna wanna make your dough and then let it sit for at least 30 minutes to an hour. So I'll have this, and it's just gonna be sitting in my fridge, chilling for a couple hours until I'm ready to roll it out. It's really important you do that. Otherwise, like I said, your crust will just be hard, and instead of being like flaky and nice.
You got a question. Where did you learn to cook?
Honestly, I'm kind of self-taught. I learned a lot from my mom growing up, But I was just really interested and curious into cooking, and I read a lot of cooking magazines, and I just tried lots. I was just very, I guess, curious about it, and I tried lots of things, and you know, you just fake it till you make it, and I just over time have just mastered my skill. And it's nice, I have 5 kids, so I'm constantly having to cook, you know, all the time for them. And so I never run out of practice. And luckily, they're all fairly adventurous. They'll eat anything I make. You know, our rule in our house is you've got to try it. You can't knock it until you've tasted it. And they tend to like more than they think. You know, they'll look at it and be hesitant, and then they're like, oh, well, this is actually pretty good. So I'm gonna give this thing, I'm gonna pull
What's the soup?
Oh, our soup, we are making broccoli and cheddar over here. So we sauteed up an onion with some carrots and some minced garlic. And I chopped up 2 big, like, florets of broccoli, or heads of broccoli. And right now they're simmering in about 4 cups of water with chicken bouillon. And we're gonna wait until they're tender, and then we'll add some cream and some cheddar cheese to make the broccoli and cheddar soup. And we have some our Reubens are right on here. I'm gonna check to see if we're ready for our first flip. Oh, yep, perfect. We've got a nice little golden color on it. This one might need a little bit longer before I flip it. I flip my sandwiches twice. First one is to really start to warm everything up. And the second flip on each side is to get the nice crunchy crust of the grilled cheese. And we are almost done here. As you can see, most of my butter is into smaller pieces than a pea. It doesn't take much to do it. It's not as hard as people think, but you could also always get out the food processor and just blend it up in the food processor until you have like a course meal, and then hand mix it with the water in. There we go. So not too shabby, almost done here, I think. Perfect. And really all you do with this is you just push down with force, and it's just like it's constantly cutting the butter into smaller pieces. I think this guy is ready to flip. Perfect. I'm gonna turn mine down just a little and let it saute. And now we are going to add about a cup of cold water. Luckily it's really cold here, so my water that's coming out is very cold, which is what you want. And let's see, I'm at about a cup. And what you're gonna do is I'm just going to use a fork to stir my water in and mix it that way. You don't wanna over mix your water into your pie crust, because you want it to be a little bit shaggy or crumbly so that you have that flakiness to it. So I'm gonna start by adding in 1 cup of cold water. I might need a little bit more, it will just depend, since I use actual like measuring cups instead of like weighing it. If you weigh it, you can be a lot more precise. So I'm gonna pour a little bit in and stir it, making sure I kind of get some of the dryness off the bottom. I'm going to add a little bit more in. There we go. And then we'll mix. And what it is it's going to look like a very dry dough until you start smooshing it together. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. But let's check on these. I think they might be ready for their next flip. Perfect. So our grilled cheese is almost done, so I'm gonna let them finish sauteing here, and I'm gonna check on my carrot here, see if it's tender, and if it is, we will add the rest of our ingredients. Perfect. They are nice and tender. So now what we're going to add is some heavy cream, about a cup of it, and some shredded cheddar cheese. So I'm gonna start by adding my heavy cream, and I kind of eyeball it, but since it is a cheesier soup, you're going to use a little bit more. So that's about a half a cup to start with, and I'm going to add in a nice big handful of cheddar cheese, which is probably about a cup, and I'm going to stir it a little bit And then I'll add a little bit more cream in and a little bit more cheese in. But I don't want to add it all right at there and then shock my soup and make it really cold. Then the cheese won't melt nicely. So I kind of do it half and half, let it reheat up to the right temperature and add a little bit more in. Good. Perfect. See, my cheese is now pretty much all melted, which is what I wanted. You don't want to jump it in all the time because it will bring your soup temperature down, and then you'll just get cheese that will be chunky instead of melted and nice. So I'm going to add my big handful of my cheese in here as well. It's about another cup. And just a little bit more cream. Not much, because this looks like it's got the right texture and creaminess. But again, I try to eye it based on how it feels when I stir it. And look at, so as I can see right now, the cheese isn't melted, but in about a minute or two, it will be nice and gooey and melted. I'm gonna turn off my skillet over here because I think we are just about ready for those. I'm gonna give this a nice stir. And then I'm gonna add in just a little bit of black pepper. And this will be, I'm gonna add this in there and get some more. But that's just a little bit of seasoning at the end. I'm gonna stir it in. And I just like to add it at the end just for a little kick. I'm gonna taste it and see if I need anything else. But I think it might be ready. Perfect. And the one thing I love about, I'm gonna turn off my heat so it stops cooking. I love about this soup is that it's not thick. I don't use any flour in it, so it doesn't get that slimy, gelatinous, pasteurized feel to it. So I've got my sandwich right here. We'll finish up our dough in just a second here. But I'm gonna get these plated because they are done. Look at this nice golden crust over here on the pumpernickel and the thing, beautiful. So I've got it right here. Pull these off. And then I'm gonna get a ladle and get a nice serving of broccoli.
You got a question, how do you not burn yourself when you eat your soup out of the pot?
I blow on it before. I also use a lot of silicone utensils. If you use metal, it keeps it hot when you come it out. If I bring it up, it's already gonna cool instantly because it's not transferring as much heat. And then I just give it a blow. But I will say, I can withstand a lot of heat. Everyone in my family, they think the water I use is scalding hot, but I'm just not a heat baby at all. I can take a lot. We'll take a cut into this. And look at this. This looks nice. You've got the cheese. You can see the sauerkraut. This looks delicious. And my favorite part is a nice dip in the soup. Excellent. Those are amazing. I love a good Reuben. And let's finish off our pie dough. This will take about another minute or so and it will be done. So I added in about 1 cup of cold water into this. Now I'm gonna go in with my hands. I'm just gonna clear my space off. And this is the key part. You wanna knead your dough kind of together and mix it. And you might need to add a little bit more water, but I think the butter should be good in here. But you don't wanna over mix it to where it turns into a paste. So you wanna knead it together where it will form into some balls, but do not over knead. So don't make it into like a sugar cookie dough. You want it to be flaky, but hold firm together. And so I'm trying to push our dry bits in. And then what will happen is when we put it in the fridge and let it chill, what little water we added in is going to hydrate up that flour. So it will come out in a couple hours much more moist than it is now. But you can see it's already starting to sit or like hold together, and the butter gives it a nice golden color to it. It's not as pale as if you were to use shortening. But I'm just folding up the dry bits in, similar to how you would make a biscuit. So you're just gonna fold it in, very similar like this. And the folding is the key point because that's where you're gonna get your flaky layers in your pie crust. Perfect. And essentially I'm just gonna be folding it up until I've got a nice, fairly big size ball, and then I'm gonna break it up into 5 smaller balls that I will then refrigerate in a bowl with some plastic wrap over.
Question, what are you making?
This is a butter crust for our chicken pot pies for later tonight. And then we made a broccoli and cheddar soup and a Reuben, so corned beef with Munster cheese, sauerkraut on rye. So I'm just gonna break now into these balls, and you see how I'm kind of keeping the dough a little bit shaggy, a little bit crumbly. This is so when I roll it out later, I'm not just rolling out into a fine paste, but it will have flaky layers in it. And I'm breaking it up into 5 pieces because each one of my chicken pot pies is going to be using a ball that I'll roll out because it'll have top and bottom. You have a question?
Question, people want to know if the kids will eat the soup.
Oh yes, the kids love the soup. It's a really good, I think because it's the cheese is the true hero in it. It's not overpowering with the broccoli. And my mom, who typically hates broccoli and cheddar soup, she said this was her favorite. She's never had one like it. And I think it's because I don't use flour in it. I don't use pasteurized cheese. I try to use, real cheddar and no flour because I just don't like those thick, gooey stews. Okay, so I have my 5 balls here. And what I'm going to do, here's the bowl that I was mixing them in. I'm just gonna pop each one in here. Get any of the crumbs that they're on there. And I will cover this bowl with some plastic wrap, like saran wrap or press and seal. If you have a lidded bowl, you could put that in there. And then I'm just gonna put this in the fridge for, let's see, probably 3.5 hours until I need it. You need to at least refrigerate it for at least 1 hour.
People want to know if you're going to start sharing the recipes.
Oh yeah, I guess if you message me, I'll send you on. I guess I can figure out I'll type them up and share them kind of as a recipe card or something in a post maybe. Most of these, I'm gonna wash my hands, are recipes I just cook and I do it as I feel, so I have to think through and sit down because I find once you really start to get to know cooking, it's about feeling. Baking is a lot more exact, but cooking is about feeling. So I'll definitely get to write these down, especially the pie crust is such a simple recipe. So I can definitely write that down, and I'll write down my soups and stuff. I'll have to think through the exact measurements. But that's why when I try to do, I kind of guesstimate what I'm actually putting in for there because it's a lot of it's taste and things.
Well, we also post the full videos.
We do post a full video, so you can always go back and watch and pause. Those typically take a couple hours for us to get to it.
And we can't always put them on TikTok, but our other services, we have them up on as well.
Yeah, we do. But yes, I will see. Maybe I can do some recipe cards. I know I did have somebody ask for a couple recipes and I messaged them, but I guess that could get tedious after a while to do individual messages. But I will definitely take that suggestion.
There's a few already asking for the pie crust.
The pie crust, well, I can tell you that right now, real quick. The pie crust for if you wanted to just do a basic, this is making 5, so I've doubled it. But it is 2 1/4 cup of flour, 2 sticks of butter, about a teaspoon of salt, and between 8 to 10 tablespoons of ice cold water. And you'll just cut your butter, you'll mix the salt and the flour, then cut your butter up into it, and then stir in the water with a fork until you form it, and then you pop it in the fridge for about 1 hour to 2 hours. And you can use it for fruit pies, or we're making a chicken pot pie later, but it works great for that. But thank you guys for joining us here today. I love that you guys come in, especially when you guys comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day. Just a recap of what we made. We had our Reubens with corned beef and sauerkraut and Munster cheese with my secret sauce on there. And our broccoli and cheddar soup. But again, thanks for seeing us today.